Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Um, if you haven't noticed, somebody showed up on my shelf over there. I'm not sure if it's Paul or if it's his cousin, Douglas. Anyway, Milkweed Chapter 10. From then on, I tried to snatch 2 loaves each day. I'd save one for Yuri and me and leave the other on the back step of Janina's house. One time I looked up and I saw her staring at me from the back window. She smiled. I smiled. I began to find things on the step where I left the bread. I found a gumdrop, a candy cigarette, and one time a fancy button. I always looked at the window, but she was never there again. At this point in the novel, you can infer that it's not safe for Jews to go outside. Little side note. One day I left the bread and I picked up a little black and white glass dog no bigger than my thumbnail. I was fascinated. I walked off staring at the tiny dog, turning it over and over in my fingers. I was almost home, and we were living in a stable loft then, when suddenly I turned and ran back to the house. It was in my mind to pound on the door to make her come out, so I could say something to her. Side note, I just think he wanted to say thank you. When I got there, somebody was at the step. It was a boy. He turned and he saw me and he stuffed the bread into his coat and ran. And I ran after him shouting, "Stop, thief!" Isn't that ironic? I caught up to him and I grabbed his long black coat, but he kept on running. He was a shoulder and head taller than me. I was his tail and I tripped and let go. I ran after him again and we dodged in and out of people and they didn't seem to notice us. And suddenly he turned. I ran right into his fist. Next thing I knew, I was in the gutter. Pinpricks of frozen rain were falling, and there was something hard in my mouth. I spit it out. It was a tooth. I reached into my pocket, and the glass dog was smashed. At home, Yuri's eyes bulged when he saw me. "What happened to you?" I told him. "You're too little to fight," he said. "You don't fight, you run." He cleaned me up. He wiped blood from my face and ears and neck. And when he touched my face, it hurt. He kept muttering, "Stupid, stupid." Next time, I wasn't stupid. I went at night. There was no one on the streets, and I wondered where the people were. The street lights were like moons cupped in iron fingers. And behind Janina's house, there was no light at all. I ran my hand across the step, and I felt something. I put it in my pocket. I put the bread on the step. I looked up at the window, but it was even darker than the night. Somewhere in the house, Janina was sleeping, and I waved at the dark. I waved at the dark, empty window, and I went away. And back on the street, I heard a shout. I turned. Someone stood up the street in the shadows, and he stepped into the light, and I heard a pop, and I saw a flash. And I felt a tug on my ear, and I reached up, and I couldn't feel my earlobe. Someone was shooting at me. I ducked into the nearest air shaft and made my way home along the alleyways. My ear hurt. I cried. Yuri came to me, and when I told him what had happened, he flicked his cigarette lighter to see. He smacked me and stuffed a rag against my ear. "Stupid! Stupid!" "I can't find my earlobe," I told him. "They shot it off," he said. "Who?" "The jackboots. Who do you think?" "Why did the jackboots shoot my ear?" "Because of the curfew." "What's the curfew?" I said. He turned off the cigarette lighter. He was a voice in the black. "Curfew means all Jews off the streets after dark." "But I'm not a Jew." "If they shoot at you, you're a Jew. I told you not to go out at night, but you don't listen." He flicked on the lighter and smacked me again and flicked off the lighter. It was true. He had told me. It was also true that I didn't listen. I had sneaked out while he slept. To show him I understood, I smacked myself. And before I went to sleep, I remembered my pocket. I pulled out the thing I had found on Janina's step. and feeling it, I could tell it was a hair bow. I guessed maybe it was red, the one she had worn on her birthday, and I put it in a bread bag where I kept all the things that she left for me on the step. The next day, Yuri tied a rope around my wrist. "Teach you a lesson," he said, and we went off to meet the boys. And we met them in a cemetery, and they laughed when they saw me. "He's on a leash!" "Bow wow! Toss him a bone!" "Look, he was in a fight with another dog, and the dog bit his ear off." "Let him alone," Yuri said. "Let me alone," I said. "I have 7 brothers and 5 sisters." They laughed even louder, but they left me alone. There was smoke-blowing Faraday, and Oleg, the one with one arm, and grim-faced Enos, and the rest of them. But there was no pile of treasures anymore, and there were no cigars, and no one threw food about anymore. But there were cigarettes. Faraday pulled a handful of cigarettes from his pocket, and everyone lit up. Even me. It was my first cigarette. "He's smoking!" exclaimed Kuba. Kuba was a clown. "He'll stunt his growth." "Yeah, how can he? He's already smaller than a cockroach." And then Kuba the clown charged into one-armed Oleg, and the two of them wrestled, but it was no match. Oleg was much better with 2 legs than Kuba was with 2 arms. Oleg had Kuba wrapped like an octopus, Kuba squealing and flailing, and Kuba grabbed Faraday's leg and bit it, and Faraday screamed. And in a moment, everyone but Yuri and grim-faced Enos was on the ground, even me with my leash. We laughed, and we bit, and we wrestled, and I think we must have looked like one squirming creature with many heads, arms, and legs. And at last we peeled apart and flopped to the ground, exhausted and laughing. My ear was bleeding again, and it hurt, and I pressed a fistful of dry grass to my ear. Except for Kuba, we sat on the ground and we talked, and we laughed, and we smoked cigarettes. But that didn't last long, as the frozen ground was even colder than the air, and one by one we stood, and we just milled about. We bumped into each other, and we grabbed each other, and we made a game of giving and receiving hugs to see who was the strongest. That's what we said. But I think it was just to be close. Because in the cemetery, our bodies were the only warmth. We were the only fires. Some of us played hide and seek among the tombstones. I was it. And when I went seeking, I came upon a tombstone such as I had never seen before. Rising up from a great block of stone was a man with wings. He was looking at the sky as if he might fly off at any moment, and I couldn't take my eyes away. "Hey, Gypsy, come on, we're hiding!" But I just stood there staring up at the great stone man with wings. And soon others were standing by. Side note, that's the cover. This is what he's looking at. "Who is he?" I said. "It's an angel," said Faraday. "What's an angel?" Grim-faced Enos said, "There are no angels." I looked at him and I pointed to the man with wings. "So what is that?" "It's stone. It's not real. It's something jackboots believe in." "I believe," said one-armed Oleg. He scratched the stump of his missing arm. "There are angels. You just can't see them." "Why not? Are they hiding?" "They're invisible." I looked around and I had to agree. If they were there, they were invisible, all right. Which made it especially good to have a stone statue of one. At least I could see that. "What do they do, these angels?" "They don't do horse flop," said Enos. "They help people," said Oleg. "When you're in trouble, angels help you get out of it." Enos snorted. He ground out his cigarette on the foot of the stone angel. "Yeah? Where were the angels when you got pushed to the tracks and a train ran over your arm, huh?" He grabbed the empty sleeve of Oleg's missing arm and flapped it in his face. Where were your angels then? Why didn't they roll you off the tracks? Why didn't they stop the train? He pointed at a boy called Big Heinrich. Big Heinrich wore bank coin bags on his feet. Look at him. Why don't the angels give him shoes? Or why don't they give him the brains to want shoes? And him! He jabbed his finger at John, who was skinny and thin and gray and never spoke. Look at him! John's dying and he doesn't even know it. Enos was shouting now. What are your angels doing for him? And he spit on the stone angel. All was silent until the cries came out. Jews! The sound came skimming over the tombstones. We turned to look, and a black wagon was coming down the path. A lumbering horse wore a black shawl over its mane. A line of people, obviously a funeral procession, black-shawled and lumbering and sad just like the horse, followed the wagon. It was a small wagon, a cart, just big enough to hold the coffin. A man was shaking his fist. Jews! You hooligan Jew boys! Filthing up this cemetery! Several of the men left the line and headed towards us, shouting. We flung our cigarettes and we ran. My leash flapped wildly, slapping tombstones. Suddenly, Kuba stopped. He turned his back to the men, dropped his pants, and he bent over and they gave them a good long look. The running men shouted louder, but no louder than we laughed. And in the stable that night, in the straw-smelling darkness, I said to Yuri, Yuri, is Enos right? There are no angels? There was no answer. Yuri, are you sleeping? I'm trying to, came the voice. Your silly questions. How do I know? Enos is whatever you want him to be. You want him to be right? No, I said. I want him to be wrong. Fine, he's wrong. But I want to believe in angels. I think. Fine, then believe. But Enos says angels are for jackboots. You're a jackboot. That's what you are, and a silly one. You don't say that I'm stupid anymore, Yuri. Now you say I'm silly. Take your pick. But I'm not a jackboot, Yuri. How can I believe in angels? When you're nothing, you're free to believe in anything. Now go to sleep, Misha. I tried to go to sleep, but a question kept nagging me. Yuri? He snarled. What? Do you believe in angels? I believe in bread, he said. Now shut up or I'll come over there. I shut up. Chapter 11. As if heeding Yuri's words, heeding means to follow, bread soon became something more to believe in than to eat. And one day I went to my usual spots, street corners near bakeries. These were the best, and I waited at the first corner. Nobody came along with a bread bag. In fact, no one even came out of the bakery. I went to the next spot, same thing. All day I went from corner to corner, nothing. Not a single loaf of bread did I see. At this point in our story, food shortages are happening all over Poland. I did see something I almost never did, though. I entered a bakery. It was a bakery with a yellow star painted on the window. The ones Yuri told me not to go into. And I was shocked because on the shelves against the wall, there was no bread at all. Only a single, sad, round roll. Behind the glass in the case were 2 or 3 cupcakes. The baker came from the back room. You want to buy something? He growled. I stared at the roll. It was better than nothing, but it was too high for me to reach. My speed and quickness were useless here. I showed him my yellow stone. I'll trade you, I said. I wouldn't have given it to him. I just wanted to trick him into taking down the roll. His face turned red. He jabbed at the door. "Out! Get out of here, you little thief!" He reached for me, but I was gone. Back in the stable, I said to Yuri, "There's no more bread." "Learn to eat pickles," he said. I did. I learned to eat a lot of things. If there was no food on the streets, under the arms of the ladies in the fox-face furs, I went to the shops. If the shelves of the shops were bare, I went to the homes. There was always food in the homes, especially the large, fine houses. The houses that belonged to the ladies of the fox-face furs. The rich people. I had to be patient because it was hard to find an unlocked door. I learned to look for little children playing outside a large, fine house. And then when they went back inside, they often forgot to lock the door. In I walked. Sometimes right behind the child. Some children looked back at me and said, "Who are you?" "Misha Pilsudski," I said. Some children said nothing. They seemed to think that if I strolled in the door with them, I must belong. I walked straight to the dining room or the kitchen. What happened then depended on who and where the people were. If there were only children, I might say, "Where are the cookies?" Or, "Where's the candy at?" If there were grown-ups about, I grabbed the first thing I saw and I ran. If there was no one, or a very young child, I would take my time shopping in the kitchen. Side note, I love that he calls his stealing shopping. One time I entered a house through an unlocked back door, and I heard voices and laughter. And I moved through the kitchen and suddenly found myself standing in a doorway staring at a family of people having dinner around a big long table. Food and silver and glass sparkled everywhere. In the middle was a great golden roasted bird, perhaps a goose or a turkey, I don't know. I must have surprised them, for all movement stopped as they stared at me. Well, I just stared at the table. But not for long, because as always, I was the first one to move. I believe this was the first rule of life that I learned. Though it was a twitch in my muscles rather than a thought in my head, always be the first one to move. And as long as that happened, they would never catch up to me, and I could not be caught. I snatched that bird off the table by the leg, and I bolted from the back door before they were out of their seats. And of course, I could not do this more than once at any house. But there were many large, fine houses in Warsaw. And Yuri tied me to his own wrist when we went to sleep, so I could not deliver food to Janina in the night. And during the day, I left things on the back step, a jar of jam, a drumstick, but I could never be sure that they were not stolen. When the bread started to go, so did the trees. Side note, why are people chopping down the trees? Think about that for a second. If the Germans have taken all the coal and all the fuel, imagine what they're using the trees for. I heard them going early one morning. I felt the night leash tug on my wrist, and I joined Yuri at the window of the loft. Outside, men were standing knee-deep in snow, chopping down trees. Why are they chopping down trees? Firewood, he said. People are running out of coal. They're cold. Wherever we went looking for food, we heard the sounds of hatchets and saws and trees. Some trees fell with an almost silent whoosh into the pillow of snow. Some trees gave a groan, and some trees shrieked in protest. And one, a thick, burly monster of a tree with warts, came down with a high, thin wail that sounded exactly like a baby crying. And soon the parks were empty. There was nothing there, no trees. There was nothing but dry grass and tree stumps. And one day Yuri went off by himself and came back with a sack of coal. Black pearls, he called them. Side note, why would he call coal pearls? Think about that for a second. I think it has something to do with their value. He took the black pearls to Dr. Korchak to keep the orphans warm. The next day, too, I went searching for black pearls. I scrounged deep into the rubble of collapsed buildings, tunneling for coal bins. I found a piece of coal here, a piece of coal there, but it was mostly just coal dust. When my sack was finally full, I marched to the orphanage and I rapped the brass knocker on the door. An orphan boy came to the door and his mouth dropped open. His eyes bulged. When he saw me, I blurted out, "I'm not an orphan. I have 7 brothers and 5 sisters." And I held out the sack. He ran. In a moment, Dr. Korchak appeared. Again, I held out the sack. "Black pearls," I said. "Keep you warm." His great white mustache stretched in both directions, and he laughed. "You," he pointed at me. "You are the black pearl." He disappeared from the doorway, and he returned with a mirror. "Look." A face, was black as coal itself, stared back at me. I never knew eyes were so white. I looked at the rest of me, and my hands and my clothes. I was a walking lump of coal. "I'm black," I said. He laughed again. "Not for long." He took the sack of coal and led me into the house. He waved his arm. "Welcome to our wonderful home." Soon I was in something called a bathtub, and a lady on her knees was scrubbing me with a brush and soap, and as I became white again and my stone became yellow again, the water became as black as jackboots. In distant rooms I heard laughter and the sound of running feet, and I felt orphans' eyes on me, but I could not see anyone. Dr. Korchak brought me new clothes, the second person ever to do that. As I put them on, he said, "So, you little sack of warmth, I think you are a gypsy, am I right?" "Yeah," I told him. "I used to be stupid, but now I'm silly." He laughed. He laughed a lot. "Ha ha ha. Who told you that?" "Yuri," I said. "Yuri's my friend. Do you believe in angels?" He stopped laughing and he stared at me. "Yes, I do believe in angels." "So do I said, deciding once and for all. "Yuri believes in bread." "Yes, I believe in bread too." He was always smiling, and his mustache made it seem a double smile. "What is your name, little man?" "Misha Pilsudski," I said proudly. His eyebrows went up. "Ah, yes." He nodded and closed his eyes. He's heard of me. And I thought, "Misha Pilsudski." He seemed to be tasting my name. "Tell me, Misha Pilsudski, where do you live?" "In the stable, with Yuri, but the horses are gone." "And tell me, Misha, do you happen to be an orphan?" I loved his goatee even more than his mustache. It was so soft and white, and I wanted to rub my face in it. I wanted to climb inside and live there and peek out, and I think he wanted me to be an orphan very badly. And I hated to disappoint him. "No," I said. "I have 7 brothers and 5 sisters. And I have a mother and a father and a great-great-grandmother who's 109. And I have a horse named Greta, if I can ever find her." I told him how we'd been balmed by the jackboots. I told him my whole story. And then Dr. Korchak left me waiting for a few minutes. And when he returned, he led me to the great front room. I was amazed. There they were, the orphans. Dr. Korchak's orphans. Orphan boys, orphan girls, and all of them were standing at attention in rows from wall to wall. And Dr. Korchak snapped his fingers, and everyone said at once, "Thank you, Misha Pilsudski." I was kind of uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. Dr. Korchak shook my hand and opened the front door for me. "You come see us again, Misha Pilsudski," he said, And I walked away in my new clothes. And that's the end of chapter 11.